welcome to The Path of Me. I'm your host, Wendy Hutchinson. I have a beautiful guest today, and she is a voiceover artist and also an entertainment artist. In addition to a public speaker, she talks about empowerment. She is a nunchuck queen. Can't wait to talk about that. So welcome, Christine Newberg. It's awesome to have you on the show. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Wendy. It's such a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited that you created some space today to talk to me. So let's just deep dive right in. I was looking over some of your information, and you said that you were a middle school science teacher for 11 years. So let me just commend you right now for surviving that. I can't imagine teaching middle schoolers science for 11 years. How did you get into that? And what led you to that career choice?
Well, I thought I was going to teach art initially. I went into the university to study art, and decided that I wasn't as much of an artist as the art students were. I seemed to have just a different kind of vision, and I did want to teach. So I thought, well, maybe I'll go into art teaching, and I wound up taking more education courses. Did substituting for a couple years, and then just somehow fell into science. And then I wound up taking more coursework and doing tests and all that so I could get certified. And that's where it landed me. And I just had so much fun with it. I did all the hands-on activities, so I brought the art part of it in there and all the hands-on stuff. Cool. I was the teacher that was doing all the labs and the crazy demos.
Yeah, they probably loved it, actually. You're keeping them engaged, which is...
Yes, engagement was an important part. And that's maybe where I tied into the entertainment thing later on, because I liked being engaging as a teacher. I thought if I could entertain them, that wasn't maybe the primary goal, but it was a means to an end. If I could keep them entertained, I could keep them engaged.
They have to be engaged and interested to learn anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So what made you decide to leave your teaching career? You did it for 11 years. So what was the catalyst for that shift and change?
Well, I was starting to feel an itch. You feel the winds of change. I think many of us have like a little gypsy in our soul. We feel like we've got to move to try something different. And I had been caricaturing. I had been drawing, pictures of people. So I still got my art part of things. I've been drawing pictures at events for a little while. And I had my daughter. And so I was trying to figure out how to go into, into working for myself. So, working for myself so I could also stay at home with her. So it became this 2-year transition of teaching online from home and building up my caricaturing and art business so that I could stay home with my daughter.
Now,
they overlapped.
To do those events, because typically those types of jobs are on site, right? They're like an event for a company or something. There's some sort of... was there travel involved for you, or
there was a little travel? I didn't go out of state for it. It was usually local things, and somebody would have to watch my daughter, while I went to the events.
Right. And so did you also at the same time start the voiceover work?
Well, the voiceover work came a little bit later. I was teaching online, and the company that I was working for wanted me to do additional recordings for them. And so I was like, okay, all right, no problem. Like, we really like your voice. Can you do this extra batch? Oh, by the way, can you sign these papers that we own it? And so I started I was like, wait a minute, you own my voice? I can't. They're like, yeah, you can't display this on like another site. Sorry. And so it kind of started thinking, I'd heard a while back someone had suggested maybe doing voiceover because I have a lower register and I sound about as neutral as it gets. Mm-hmm. So I bought a mic and started recording. I did 500 auditions underneath blankets. 500 auditions. I submitted online. I was horrible, but I had it in my head. I don't know if it was overconfidence or what. I'm going to get good at this. I'm going to master this.
Did you have anyone guiding you at all, or it was just a wing and a prayer?
No, I really didn't. I had a couple people that would talk to me for a couple of minutes or something, but I had someone tell me, don't get that mic. I'd already bought it. I didn't have money to buy anything else at that time. I just didn't have money to buy, high-end equipment. And I remember a guy telling me, don't buy that mic. Well, 5 months later, I wound up landing my first TV commercial with that mic. And we recorded it with that cheap, quote unquote, cheaper mic that he said I couldn't. It was all about the settings. So I really was terrible at it for the first 5 or 6 months. And then all of a sudden something clicked. I finally got some good feedback. Someone told me what was wrong with my audio. And so that's kind of why now I really like pairing up mentors with mentees. And that's why I have this, the New Job podcast that I started last year. And it's still kind of, I'm still tweaking it. I'm still reworking it. I've got another direction for it.
You pairing mentors with mentees. How did you come up with that?
I think just from the idea of me, especially being a single mom, wanting to generate more income and being very close to my heart as to, people needing to make an income and how important it is to provide for your family. And also the sense that I wish I'd had better mentorship in the different careers that I had been in. I think I would have gotten even further, maybe sooner. And I wouldn't have made certain mistakes. Maybe I would have not run into certain pitfalls had I had a little bit better guidance in all teaching, caricaturing, and a voiceover.
Right.
What's
but
that?
I think sometimes through the pitfalls and the process, it positioned you, right? Because you went through it to be able to help someone.
That's true. Yeah, it has its reasons. It has,
the path a little bit easier, right? So sometimes you kind of have to walk through the fire to lead someone else through.
That's true. And as much as we can maybe help them with those pitfalls, they're going to find other ones. They're going to make their mistakes, and that's just how we learn.
And thank goodness you're doing this work, because now with this pandemic, who's throwing big corporate events or
all of us in the entertainment world, we lost so much.
I can't imagine, because those things are usually booked out a year in advance or 6 months in advance. So
yeah, we started losing work back in February because our international groups that would come over, and especially on the West Coast and down in Miami, these big conventions, they started cutting travel from China and different parts of Europe pretty early on.
Right.
And so then by middle of March, we were drying up with gigs. I think the last gig I had was March 11th.
It's kind of stressful to just watch your calendars. You start erasing or drawing black lines through all of these events scheduled, and you start to think, oh my God, okay.
How am I going to pay my bills?
I do need to pay my rent. Put food on the table. I do have to.
Well, and even with voiceover, the voiceover stalled. I mean, I have a good group of clients, but I'm not like so far out there that I have the savings account and all that with lots of voiceover work, money that I just pack away.
Right.
It's not like that,
Right.
And so even those clients, they were trying, when everything went to lockdown, they couldn't even go into their production studios to go produce the video work. They couldn't even process all the stuff.
I didn't think about that.
It took them a good couple of weeks. They were really quiet as they all figured out how they were going to take all their equipment, move it home. Because even the stuff that I have, I'm used to working from home. These people are used to going into an office.
Right. So they weren't exactly equipped.
Most of them were not. No, it took time. Some of my smaller clients that had already been working from home, they were feeding me little bits of work here and there. It wasn't until the bigger production companies started moving.
How do you still had some continuity though, and it wasn't just a complete shutdown?
No, I'm fortunate that way. Yeah,
that would have been
helpful.
So stressful.
it was. I'm okay now.
A few minor tips.
I only twitch a little bit still.
I think you're not the only one. I mean, I think that people across the United States and also around the world have had to really adapt. This is just such a new way of being. And it really, these times really test you. They kind of get you to really see what you're made of, because you're either going to rise stronger or you're going to fold completely. And you strike me as the kind of person that would rise stronger and not.
Thanks. So I don't think I have a choice. I think we have to be resilient.
Well, that's true. That's true. So let's kind of deep dive into the whole nunchuck thing, because I'm so fascinated by this whole aspect of you. And there's always a story, right? There's always a story. So I'm going to let you tell your story about how you got into this and how it changed your life, because it really has.
It has. It's shaped a lot of the direction I'm kind of moving in, especially with empowerment. I like to empower not just women, but it is often a focus, is to focus on women empowerment. So to back up a little bit, some time ago, I was with an abusive partner. He was abusive both physically, emotionally, and financially. The physical stuff was not fun, but I would say that, that was damaging, but the most damaging was probably the emotional abuse and the financial abuse. There was so much control there.
Sure.
So early on, I should have seen the red flags. He would do things physically to me, and then when I would cry out in pain or say that hurt, and he would say, I have to toughen you up. So to feel like, yeah,
That's
so to feel,
intense.
and I think in my head, I thought I don't know that I thought I deserved it. I thought was making too big of a deal of it. I'm like, no, it didn't hurt that bad.
There was that kind of nudge that, okay, this is not cool. But then at the same time, you're like, well, I don't want to make waves.
I want to rock the boat. I really
Right.
like him, or I really love him,
Right.
And so I would, in my head, I would just go, well, okay, that's a little off, but look at all the other wonderful things.
So you
So
kind
I
of
would
distorted
ignore
it
it.
a little bit. Was that, prevalent before you committed, like when you were dating, or?
No, it wasn't until we became more committed
Mhm.
that it started to happen.
Mhm.
And I think I was just so head over heels that I would get blinded. And then when it was happening, I just made up all kinds of excuses. I wanted to keep the beautiful picture of what, we were creating, the other beautiful parts of it. And I should have run for the hills, because
Right.
no amount of abuse, even a small amount, is acceptable. Imagine if somebody could take your hands, and he would do things, I won't go into all of them, but even something as simple as he would take my hands and just crush them in his hands. He had big hands, and I'd cry out in pain, or he'd whack me in the arm, or there was other physical things that he would do, and sometimes he left marks. And those were, but they weren't. It wasn't like I was getting beat to the ground, but they were forms of control. And so he also controlled all the finances. I couldn't control any of the finances and all that. And when I would complain, he'd say, well, you're whining, you're being too sensitive. I need to toughen you up, that kind of thing. And so I felt the need to start taking karate. So I felt empowered for a while, and he didn't take it very seriously. He didn't like going to the classes or watching the competition thing. He would sometimes come, but he was just like, nonplussed. But I did feel empowered because I started fighting. And so I started fighting men. Now, looking back, I understand. Well, I started fighting in sparring. Okay, they were sparring. Right. We had headgear and stuff. But at one point, I took a fist to my jaw a little too hard. I didn't block properly. And it hurt really bad. And I was, instead of not seeing that wasn't right, and they shouldn't have paired with him, they should have paired me with another female, but I was pushing for it. I was more proud that I got hit in the jaw and took it. It made me feel tough.
Wow.
And so my jaw started hurting like in a couple of days later. And then I finally did I went to the dentist, and he said that this was like sometime later. And he says, do you play extreme sports? And I was like, no, this was a little ways later, probably like a month or two later. And I just disconnected what had occurred. It was there for a cleaning or something. And he says, because you have this little piece of bone that's just like separated from your jaw. It's a small fragment, but it's like encapsulated in skin. You must have got hurt at some point. I was like, no. And it wasn't until I left, I kept thinking, what did I do? That I remember getting smacked in the jaw so hard that I was literally had like stars. I was so stunned. Lucky I didn't get a concussion. Wow. And lucky he didn't hit me in the temporal lobe, that he just hit me in the jaw. And it was a mistake on the spar. He wasn't trying to hit me in the head. Right. It was trying to make a hit. And I probably ducked weird, and he was probably going for my shoulder, and I probably ducked and got hit. And I shouldn't have been paired with him. He was way too strong. So anyways, I went through a period of time where I was like, maybe I should stop sparring. I got hurt, that was from that. And, maybe I'll back off of karate because it's kind of expensive. And you know what, I feel strong now. And probably during that period of time, I do remember this period of time where there was no physical aggression towards me. There was other forms, and I probably felt more safe, or maybe I felt empowered, like I could take him if he really, Right. And I wasn't as bothered by it. I must have gone through a period of time where I really wasn't scared. And then years when, time went on, and some of the activity started back up again, where he became more physical again. But most of the abuse occurred financially, where he controlled all the money. I had to ask just to buy groceries, and I wasn't allowed to buy clothes. Occasionally I could buy clothes, but I had to always ask permission. And because he controlled the accounts, and we were always in the red. And so there were other things. He had another addiction that was going on that was creating
that you were
the drain.
Aware of, yeah.
I wasn't aware of.
Wow.
I was because I wasn't allowed to touch the finances. So anytime a man controls who you see, how much money you can have in your possession, those are forms of abuse too. You know, when they have to control, he started tracking me on my phone. I kind of figured out a couple times, I thought he backed off and he wound up doing it again. So it wasn't until I broke away from the relationship.
Right.
Okay. I got away from this committed relationship, escaped. Okay. I look at it that way. Family and friends helped me get out of it. It wasn't until later, several months later, that all of a sudden everything just hit me. And I realized that this was serious. This was abuse on so many different levels.
Right.
This person he could have been abused when he was younger. I don't know. I'll never know that entire story. But it's not my job to find out.
You know, when you're in it, it's so difficult to see it.
It is. And it's like, if I could tell anybody who's in an abusive relationship, they don't think, the problem is you don't think you're in it until you start looking at the little pieces, like, oh wait, he was kind of rough with me. And not just one time, it happened again. And yeah, it was a little bit, but it was their forms of control. Or he doesn't let me see my family, or he doesn't, I went and saw my family, but he was always questioning, always had to know where I was at. And he'd always find me. And I didn't know he was tracking my phone.
Right. That's tough. What's really amazing is that despite the fact that he was controlling the finances and all of that, you were still able to escape.
I think there was like straw after straw after straw, and it was the straw that broke the camel's back. It was enough things that finally stacked up. And I was on the phone with a friend, and he says, I don't know what I can do. I have to come through the phone and shake you. Get out of there. You're being manipulated. You're being controlled. This is a dangerous situation. Yeah. And now that I look back at things that were happening, it was dangerous. Yeah. It was becoming very dangerous for many reasons. And so when I did break away, it took a few months. All of a sudden, my anger started coming out. And it was a period of time, there was nobody around. And I was so angry. I felt that he was getting away with all this stuff. He had hurt a lot of people, including me, but he'd hurt other people.
Right.
He'd taken from other people. He had this problem with his addiction, and he was a very angry person. But I was also angry because of all the things that were happening. And I took my fist, and I was by myself. I took my fist, and I took it and I punched it right through a 3/4 inch drywall into concrete.
Wow. Did you break your hand?
No, it was a little scuffed up the next day.
Wow.
I was upset.
Jeez.
Fortunately, someone came in not too long afterwards, and I kind of made it look like it wasn't a big deal, and he had to fix something else in the wall anyways. He was like, oh, there's a little thing here. Oh, he didn't really put it two and two together.
He didn't go deeper into it.
No, he just patched it all up and made it look beautiful. And I was like, oh, okay. I got away with that, but it was a sign to me that I needed to get my anger under control. And that could spiral out. I mean, I caught it quick enough, and I thought,
I think in the circumstances, there was probably a lot suppressed that hadn't had an opportunity to process out. Kind of like,
I had been hit in the arm enough times. I'd been punched in the arm enough times. Marks had been made on me, and there were other things that occurred in the relationship that were very damaging, very controlling. And I think I was just like, I felt this person had just gotten away with it all. And that's not true. Other things would have occurred. He actually got his nose broken by somebody else down the way. So I was a little like, oh, okay, well, karma took care of that.
Right.
But
right.
It wasn't, I didn't know where that came from. It just happened. I heard about it, and I was like,
I'm just grateful that you were able to break away,
Yeah, it took a long time. I kept making excuses. We were talking before. I just kept making up excuses as to why he was like this and why he was treating me this way. And other people were starting to pick up on it, and they were trying to be careful. But the problem is when you pick up on abuse, I think sometimes we're such a hushed society that we're afraid to step in. We're afraid to say, hey, this is wrong. You shouldn't be treated this way. We don't want to get involved. And so sometimes that person might go unhelped because they're not asking for help. They don't know how to ask for help. They feel shame. I felt incredible shame. At one point I had marks all over my neck, and I had to cover up my neck with my hair. I covered it with makeup as best I could. And I covered it with my my neck up. But just all these signs of control. No, I wasn't totally bruised up, but there were bruises.
Well, it's really difficult too when you are sort of cut off and limited in your contact with family and friends and things like that. It's not like you can really
wanted me to be very
anytime.
Yeah. that was kind of the breaking point, though, is that right towards the end, all of a sudden he wanted me to not say a word. And he was really trying to shut me down because I was questioning all these things. Some things were occurring and I was starting to question a lot, and he was just shutting me down. And I really started to realize how dangerous it was getting, because he had tried to shut me down other ways before and keep me in line. Even his friends, I had noticed, he didn't have that many, but he had a couple friends. One of them had stepped in to try to keep me in line one day at an event.
Oh my gosh, are you serious?
He thought he didn't like something I said, and he didn't like that my dress was too short. And he was very upset or not upset, but he was very, condescending, and, and that's minor, but there was forms of control. We have sometimes in our society where we feel that we need to make sure that women act like ladies all the time. Men can get away with saying what they want to say. They can be bold. They can be brave. Women, we say something, we're bitchy, or we're too bossy, or, the fact that we are showing a little leg, now we're suddenly sexual. Where a man can take off his shirt and it's like, oh, he's just being a guy.
I think too, over time, a lot of this happens. It's gradual, and over time, it escalates. But when you're in it, it's probably so gradually escalating that you're aware of it, but it's not like it's just a shock.
Well, and I think too, I did have this desire to project that everything was fine, because if I did that, there was no conflict. I could keep him calm. I could keep other people calm so that they didn't see anything that was going on. And then for a little while, my world just seemed nice, and he would do nice things for me. He wasn't all bad. But that's the problem. When you're in an abusive relationship, you'll only focus on the good things.
You get lulled into this false sense of, it's actually not that bad, because
it's not bad. Look what the nice thing he did for me. He seems so loving.
Right.
Yeah. So, but now that I look back, I'm like, how did I tolerate it? And there were things that I didn't know. There were a lot of shocks that came out. I had people really question me when I started to talk about it a little bit. I started to open up, and I started to say, this is what happened after I had left. And people were like, how did you not figure it out? How did you not know? And there were people that were critical, and I can see how people that are in an abusive relationship, because I started to shut back down again. I'm like, oh my gosh, people aren't going to believe me. There were people that wouldn't believe me. There were people that turned against me because he was very charismatic in his approach. Good looking guy, charismatic. People just could not fathom.
A narcissist, because that
very
seems
much so.
Like a narcissist profile. They have a really charismatic personality, and they can just schmooze.
He comes off very likable. Yes.
Right. So then no one would believe that they would actually do this to.
Yeah, and he spun up some stories right after I left with some people that we knew, and it was very believable. And the instant eyes were on me. Even though he admitted to some terrible things that he did, he still pushed blame back on me. This is why I did what I did, because she, and he would just push blame.
He had no choice. He was a victim of the whole situation.
The victim. I think it took a lot of people time to figure it out. So it does take time. And I think what happened, I finally had to separate myself. And that's where some of the anger was coming from. I'm like, how can people believe him? Well, I don't understand. How is he's getting away with certain things?
What's so hard is you didn't have a voice in the relationship, and then you still didn't have a voice for a little while.
Yes, I was very much shut down. Yes. Really? So voices become very important.
Yeah. So what got your interest sparked back into going back to the karate?
It was punching a hole in a wall. I couldn't believe that I'd done that. I would just be appalled thinking that men get away with this, and that's wrong. Let's say if they did that show of force in front of somebody, that's abusive right there. So I was treading the line of, how am I going to handle my anger? Do I do this and now somebody sees this? What if my children were to see this? What if a new relationship were to see this?
Right.
That would mean that I'm falling into some patterns.
Right.
So I caught it right away.
You have self-awareness, which is huge. That's always a pivot piece.
I think that helps it be reflective. Sometimes it's overcritical, and other times it helps us. It helps us grow and change, Mm-hmm. So at that point I thought, you know what? I think it was like the next day. I bought myself nunchucks. I went online, bought nunchucks. I couldn't wait till they came in. I got 2 sets. And from that point forward, I started watching YouTube videos, and I just started creating this. You
learned this on your own, like through YouTube? Are you serious?
Because I didn't know anybody else who knew how to do nunchucks. I tried calling the old karate instructor. I'm like, hey, do you He didn't answer my calls. Maybe he just didn't own that karate school anymore because it'd been quite some time.
Wow.
You know? So all of a sudden I started feeling empowered. I feel like feeling strong, like I can protect myself. And then I felt like I was, it was a lot of anger. Don't get me wrong. Now I swing them. It's very zen. It's very relaxing.
So when you first started, it was more aggression, right? It was a different kind
extreme
of energy,
aggression,
right? Like anger and just like processing. You were
I wanted to
processing and clearing something.
I wanted to rip things apart. I wanted to tear down walls if I could. I would have literally just torn something apart.
You're like in beast mode.
A beast mode. Okay, so I remember one time I was working on the chucks, and these yoga girls came into like where I was staying in my apartment. There was this gym, and so it's a glass box, and the glass box is really the yoga box. Okay, and these girls were coming in with their pads and their the yoga pads, and they're like chatting, and they got their cute little like Starbucks smoothie drinks. Oh my gosh, and I'm just like sweating bullets, knocking chucks, and just like, welcome back. They just turned on their heels and left. So at the time I had braces, and this is kind of a funny story. So I'm working the chucks when I had really aggressive guy, really hot guy walks in, and I see him, and I was really practicing this one move where I spin the chuck like behind me, and it comes back forward, and I do like a double chuck. It's hard to explain. It was a really cool move, and I just about got it down. Guy walks in, I get slightly distracted, but I can't believe that I made the motion, and it was this really cool trick right as he's watching me, and I'm so proud of myself. I get distracted again, and the chuck comes around and smacks me right in the mouth, and I had braces on, and I started just bleeding right out of my mouth. Okay. So his face went from like, nice, hot girl working the chucks or whatever, whatever he was thinking. Maybe he was only slightly impressed. Went from like slightly impressed possibly to like, oh my gosh, she's bleeding. And I was like, wiping up the blood. It was terrible.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened. So how did that evolve? So you went from like really processing a lot of anger through it. And then I started
changing
as you kept going.
I wanted to elevate it somewhat. I felt really strong, but now I was reconnecting with my sense of femininity, and I felt like I need something else. I need fucking heels. I want to feel really empowered. And that's what I got. And I had stilettos. I was starting to go out. I was starting to go, I always went out by myself. It was rare that I went out with friends. It was a couple times I went out with friends. And I always had a little bit of a lone wolf that way a lot of times. I mean, I like relationships, they're wonderful, but I also enjoy being single. Yeah. And so I was enjoying going out by myself. Girls always messed things up. I had a lot more fun being single, I still do, just going on my own. So I had like lots of pretty heels that I'd gotten. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going out for a while. I'm going to work the nunchucks in the heels. So I would get dressed up with my heels just to go swing chucks.
Wow.
And I would start taking video. I'm like, I feel so empowered. And I felt, the heels always made me feel kind of empowered before. Now they really made me feel empowered. And I wasn't feeling super ultra sexy. I was just feeling confident. I was feeling powerful in myself. I was feeling Christine again, but a more improved version of Christine. I don't know if that's the right way to say it. I felt like I could take on the world again.
What it feels like is you became more embodied within yourself. Like you kind of locked in within your soul, like you connected and locked in somehow when you were doing that. I don't know if that's true, but that's what
I did. And I started forming what felt like a shield. I like shields. I have imagery that I like with shields. I'm into anchors. I like feeling very anchored for my children, being this like strong entity in their lives, grounded. Anchors can be looked at some certain ways, like, oh, you're too anchored, whatever. I'm like, no, anchor just means that it's the symmetry of feeling centered, and it's also a hopeful symbol. It doesn't have any religious context to me other than it's a hopeful, centered kind of a symbol. And so, I forget where I was going with that, but going back to the nunchucks though, they also help, the shield. They help me stay feeling like I had a shield around me and the people that I love, and that I could never be attacked again. Right. And so it's sort of built a little sense of maybe overconfidence too, because there's times where I'll just go out and I'm like, you know what, let's let somebody approach me. I don't care, and that's not maybe the safest mindset, but I have warded off situations before where I have been approached, I have been followed, And I have a different mindset now. Instead of this victim mindset or I need to run mindset of I will approach the person who's approaching me. I've been followed a couple times, leaving a festival back in February or March. And I was walking out to the parking lot. And I knew it was a bad place to park. I shouldn't have parked there, but I didn't have a choice. There wasn't much, and I didn't want to keep looking around for a parking spot. So on the way back, this man followed me back and he kept following me. I said, don't approach me. Do not approach me. And he started like calling, oh, what are you going to do? Huh, honey? And he started getting closer and closer. And I turned back on him. I started walking towards him. And I said, because I will, and I started using profanity and I F you up and da, 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 and I just kind of came at him like a crazy woman. And I've done that a couple of times and it's effective. It just kind of scares them off. And I don't recommend you put yourself into situations like that. Right? That's not ideal. You shouldn't be setting yourself up like that. But when you are in a situation, sometimes, not being the one that looks like the prey.
Right.
And so that's kind of been my mindset of trying to get past these fears. I still have fears. I still have nightmares. They're just not as many anymore.
Right.
And I have a better way of handling some of the fears that go back to the abuse that occurred.
So tell me how you got all the way from just processing this anger to this place where when you're doing them, you're in this Zen state of mind.
I think there were other parts of what was happening with the relationship that I started to get some closure from. And I also started to I was getting exercise. So now all of a sudden I was getting addicted to the endorphin rush I was getting.
Right.
I also found that there were light up chucks. I could get nunchucks that light up.
That's so cool.
And those were I couldn't swing those quite as fast because if they're heavy and they're not padded and they knocked me out a couple times,
right.
Or it would hit like, oh man, I'm be sore now, or I'd hit my leg too hard. So it's a little slower motion with the light up chucks. There's a different fluid. It's a little more fluid. It kind of ties back into the flow arts. I want getting myself a space whip. So there's another weapon for you. My next thing is a bow staff, that. And so right. They're weapons in a sense. They're these martial art type weapons. But they just represent building this like shield around yourself and that I can protect myself. And it doesn't mean that I don't benefit when I'm in a relationship with a man, you know what I mean? Or I don't benefit from being in a relationship. But that just as myself on my own, I still protect myself. I would want that for any woman. I want that for any man because we talk about women in abusive relationships, but men are in abusive relationships sometimes as well.
Absolutely.
And they don't know how to respond because they could be bigger and they could create a bigger problem. They could be an abuser as well. So that they'll just take the abuse and they don't know how to get away from it.
Right.
So, the nunchucks have become more symbolic now. They more symbolize this flow art of creating this a symbolic shield around myself and those that I love.
Do you teach people how to use them?
I have a few times. I've taught a couple classes and it's really cool, to be able to teach other people how to use them.
Yeah. So what have you learned about yourself going through this entire evolution? I mean, it's been a while and you've been through so much and you've healed a lot of aspects of yourself through this.
I'm getting there. I think I've learned that, first of all, not everybody is an abuser. I've had several relationships since then, some very short, and I've met a lot of wonderful people that aren't abusers. So I've had all these examples of what healthy people are like.
Right.
Maybe we weren't compatible for other reasons, or maybe it was not the right timing or whatever, the case may be. But these were good people. I got really discerning really fast. This is the type of person that I wanted to spend time with if I was going to consider them for a relationship. So that's one aspect of it. But the other aspect of it is that I became more confident in how I spoke. It made me able to talk about things with people and not feel I had to hold so much back. It made me realize that I had powers just like a superpower. We all have superpowers.
Right.
And that maybe my powers weren't just limited to art and science. Okay.
Right.
I think we do.
You're so much more. You're so much more than
we
that.
all are. We're all so much more. And then we're multi-layered. And so, we have so many different things. I feel like I've lived many lives because I've had several different jobs over the years, too, careers.
Now tell me, you were a keynote speaker. Tell me about that. You were a keynote speaker. You sent me something And
I've done some different things. I've done some moderating and not a lot of keynote speaking, but a little bit. And so those are fun to do. They're a little nerve wracking
I
because
mean, were you sharing your story about empowerment, or what was your topic?
Mostly what it is it's about empowerment. The one that I think I sent you some stuff that I was doing last year for FAU is for women empowerment. And so I did talk a little bit about my story at that event, not in the detail I think that I've gone into with you, which is me still getting used to that. I'm still getting used to talking about it. There's still some discomfort
There's
there.
some vulnerability there
It is.
go there. And also I think, different audiences are going to be able to handle different things. If you have like a 10-minute segment, you can't really go into as much detail or depth,
Yeah, I had a longer period of time. I even talked about Cardi B a little bit, and I connected some of her story to what I was doing, even though I think hers was way crazier than my story. And I still think my situation, I haven't gone into all the details with you, was scary enough.
Yeah.
It was nice being able to connect it to somebody who was also more along the age group of the people that I was talking to. They were a bit younger than me.
Right.
They were
It was
college
relatable.
students. Yeah. And she's somebody who's she's a celebrity. And so it was kind of fun to talk about that. But I also talked about several other people in the talk that were a surprise to people. There were several people that had gone through abusive relationships. And so it's not super uncommon, but I do think it's something we don't talk a lot about. It's an uncomfortable topic.
I think it's important to have these conversations.
Well, that's like with Black Lives Matters. It's important to have these conversations so that people, it is uncomfortable.
You can't affect change without awareness.
And they can't have awareness without people having these uncomfortable discussions.
Right.
They have to occur, so.
Right. So you've been self-employed for a long time, right?
About 6.5 years.
And
coming up on 7.
How did you make that transition? Was it challenging for you? Because you have 2 children.
It's still challenging.
I mean, you have 2 children. You have to have some courage to take the leap and go that direction, right?
Yeah, I had wanted to do it sooner. I remember there was 6 months prior I'd wanted to do it, but I wasn't able to, so I had to kind of make a second plan. I wasn't ready to make the jump yet, partially because at the time it didn't look like our finances when I was asking my partner for permission, basically. It wasn't like and really a couple should look at those things, that they're combining their income, and it didn't look like I could do it. So I waited a little bit longer and tried to get more voiceover going. So when I did finally start, I did it, I'm trying to think back. If I back up almost 7 years, I started doing the caricaturing solely. It was right after my son was born. I was working too many jobs. I was teaching online. I was tutoring. I was doing voiceover, or I was doing all these different things. I just couldn't do anymore.
How you kept track of all that, especially with young kids too.
I made that year somewhere between $75,000 and $85,000, and I'd never made that much money before. And I was doing it pregnant, and I had other people living with us because we had taken other people in.
Oh my God.
So I think as females we have we want to care, we want to nurture, we want to provide, we give, and sometimes we have a hard time saying no. And at some point I should have said no, but I seemed so giving and I wasn't saying no, and so I got walked all over and I got
that's part of the lesson though, right? I was a chronic giver, and you just give everything, you give yourself away till there's nothing left, man. There's literally nothing left, and you have to literally piece by piece pull all those fractals of yourself back in, and it teaches you what it taught me. I don't know about you, but what it taught me going through that process was I have value.
Yes. High value.
I matter, and I have value, and I will be treated accordingly. I will do things that are good for me. Whereas before, I was always putting myself last. I even below the dogs. The dogs had to go out before I could.
Same thing. Yeah.
So I think that's a common thread for women in particular, whether you are very successful in a corporate career or a stay-at-home mom. Whoever you are, wherever you are, there's a cultural thing that tells you that's what good girls do, or that's what good wives do. is you take care of everybody, but nobody says take care of yourself, because if you do that, then people, I felt I would be viewed as being selfish.
Yeah, I think that is something we're brought up with. It's not necessarily intentional, but it's that sense of, well, you need to take care of your family. I don't think it's been until recently that people have been really pushing that. Hey, mom, go take care of yourself. Go get centered again, so that you put your oxygen mask on, so that you can help other people.
That's the whole thing. Is I think women need to, especially at this pivotal time, put their oxygen mask on first, because we have this, I think, false belief that we can keep saving the world without saving ourselves first. But that's just not true. You're going to go down. You're going to go down with the ship if you don't put your oxygen mask on first, you know?
And I think we have to keep relearning it, because we'll get to a point where, like, okay, I figured it out. I spent, and then it starts to erode away again, because we start to go back to those old patterns, of maybe taking care of everybody again, and we have to remind ourselves. So it's a good thing to keep reminding ourselves to do that.
Absolutely. And I think when you start to invest in yourself and believe in yourself, and then eventually love yourself, it's a huge shift, because who you become is your authentic self, which all those years of giving yourself away is basically eroding your sense of self, right? You kind of lose yourself in it, in being in service to others, or in your situation being forced and sort of manipulated into sacrificing yourself all the time, and what you needed and what you wanted for somebody else, right?
Yeah, and it wasn't my fault, but I also see times where I gave it away, and I would love to teach other people, and especially my children, to not give themselves away so easily. I mean, it's good to give love freely and not expect in return. We all, I think, go through periods of time where we have to learn that or relearn that.
Right.
But there comes a point where you have to draw a line and say, yeah, but I'm being taken advantage of at this point, or I have to stop this kind of behavior.
You have to advocate for yourself, and also have some discernment around what feels aligned and what feels right for you, and then what is a little bit off, because you are always getting signals.
And that's the thing. Now I'm better at trusting my gut than I used to be.
Right.
And I'm trying to teach my daughter that. I'm like, if something seems wrong, it probably is.
You're going to feel it. You're going to feel it. Right?
Well, yeah. So
I'm trying to at ignoring the signs, right?
Well, I think because we don't trust ourselves. We've been taught sometimes, and I think that this has happened. I know this happened in this particular relationship. I started getting taught to stop trusting myself. Oh, right. You're crazy. Oh, you're overreacting. Oh, that didn't happen. You're too sensitive. What are you talking about? Well, that didn't happen. And when it did.
Right. But then you start thinking you're going crazy, right?
Yeah. So, and just because you don't want to believe that person would trick you, you kind of buy into it and go, oh, they must be right. I must be the crazy one.
We were talking a little before the interview. We were talking about how you have to love all aspects of yourself. And I thought that hearing that from you was such a wise statement, because I fully believe that too. We're in a society where we're taught that you only love the glossy, model, happy parts of you, the shiny parts of you, but there's a whole spectrum. We are the whole spectrum. We have darkness in us. We have things we're ashamed of in us. We have behaviors that we participated in throughout our lives that we're not proud of. And then we have this beautiful aspect of ourselves. But all of it comes together.
All of it's beautiful.
The whole, right? Exactly. So I wanted you to speak to that a little bit.
Well, I think it's in certain cultures where it's okay for things to break, because when they put them back together, pottery and such, they'll seam it up with gold, or they'll seam it up with another paint, another color, and then the broken, repaired piece is far more beautiful than the original piece that was so perfect. And we do, and particularly as women, we want this projection of. And men are like this too. They want to give off. We're all like this to a certain degree. We want to give off that everything's fine. And so, and we talk about this all the time, right? With social media and Facebook and Instagram, that we want to project that everything's beautiful. And so you'll see models, they'll drive themselves crazy trying to, swimsuit models. And I know people like this too, and they're trying so hard in their life that God forbid they post something negative that somebody might not like it as much. Like, I post things now that I'm more comfortable with that I wouldn't have been comfortable with years ago. I would have only posted happy stuff. I have lots of happy things that happen. But I also have things that speak to me on a different note. Maybe they remind me of my past. Maybe they remind me of something that happened to me. Maybe it speaks to a chord of something I'm just interested in talking about. Whatever it is, it's okay to, like when people say, don't be negative. Oh, it's okay to be negative.
To be authentic, right?
It's okay to be, you're all of these things. You don't always have to be shining and happy and smiling.
Right. And I think there's a natural tendency to look away. But if you do that, then you're not embracing all of you. That's not self-love. You're not practicing that act of complete self-acceptance.
Right. It's that manifestation really of, like we talk about the yin and yang, the dark and the light, the male and the female, these components that create this whole. Like I even though I feel very feminine, I have my male components. Just like a man might feel very masculine, but he'll have his female components. I may feel on a day, most days I feel very bright and cheery, but I have these darker, beautiful, deeper, richer colors in me that are from the experiences that happened. It could have been from the abuse. It could have been from years ago because our family went through Hurricane Andrew, and that was, devastating in its own right. These different experiences that build us up. Even the ones that are the tragic ones, the ones that are the tough ones, those are the ones that make us appreciate those lighter moments. So it's okay to express it. It's okay to embrace it. That's part of you. That's why we like TV shows. Like I know there's one that I like right now. A couple of them. I love Dead to Me, and I got
hilarious. That show is so hilarious.
Isn't it great? But it's that dark humor. But I can relate to some of the characters in it,
Yeah.
And you're just like, oh man. But then you start thinking, well, my life's not that bad. I don't have to worry about burying somebody,
Right. No, but I think it's so important that we learn to really look at all aspects of ourselves and accept ourselves fully, because without those aspects, we would not be who we are today. So true. We're denying it. We're denying part of ourselves.
We're more likely to accept the darker parts of somebody else than we are to accept them of ourselves.
Right.
So we'll look at somebody else's story and go, wow, that's so amazing. But the moment we have to look at those darker parts of our own story, we're like, what if people judge me and think I'm weird? You know what? They will for 5 minutes. They'll get over it. Like when I first put out some of the pictures and the stuff, and I told people I was doing nunchucks, I got some funny eyes about it. People were like, I was on a date, and the guy's like, what do you mean nunchucks? Why do you have to wear heels? And what are you trying to prove? And he was like, really,
he was really defensive about the whole thing. So.
He's like, haven't you women, you got everything you need. It's the same, equal as us. And he got really kind of mad about it.
Wow.
And I was like,
it's been nice. I got to go now.
Exactly. He followed me to my car. No. He wanted to continue the conversation. I was like, no, we're done. So he started sending me some mean texts about nunchucks and kind of making fun of me. I just was like, I wasn't impressed. I wasn't upset. I was just like, block.
I'm done here.
Like, block. I don't know why you're coming at me. Like,
my gosh, you triggered something. You triggered something.
I think, and that's what it might make some people uncomfortable, because it might trigger something in them that makes them look at something that they're relating to. But at some point, like I know there's a couple of people that were uncomfortable with what I was doing. A lot of people liked it because they're like, that's cool, that's empowering, that reminds me of such and such, and they were more open to the idea. But not everybody's ready for that yet. So there were a couple of people that were just like, what are you doing? I don't want to talk about it. And so I just, it's not my responsibility to explain it to everybody.
They can only meet you where they are.
Right. And that's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. Everybody's on their own journey, and everybody needs to be where they need to be, and it's okay. And what's beautiful about you is I can tell that you know who you are, and I want to honor you for coming through such tough times and navigating so much. I'm sure there were times you were fearful and uncomfortable and dark, and to be able to get to this place and do it all on your own is so amazing.
Well,
so
I've had help along the way. I've had friends, I've had family. One of the things that I think is really hard for people, particularly that are trying to get out of something like an abusive situation, and abusive situations come in many forms.
Right.
And it's not always physical. It can still be abusive.
Right.
But they're so afraid they're not going to have support. And let's say your family or your friends, you can't think of anybody that would support you. Here in South Florida, we have Women in Distress. They are an amazing resource. They have a hideaway. I've actually been there, not for those reasons, but I was helping out with something else because I have an interest in what they do.
Right.
And there's other shelters that will take you in any part, at least of the U.S. There's so many shelters all over the place. There's domestic violence hotlines. There's so much out there. There's so many resources and the Jewish Federation they provide support for domestic violence and domestic abuse, the whole spectrum. So there are resources. That person doesn't feel that anybody in their family can help them. They need to pick up the phone, or they need to get online,
Right.
Google it, and make that phone call.
Right.
There are ways to get out.
Ask you for advice for anybody who might be in that situation right now, who's watching, that maybe feels like they need to make a change. Like, what can you recommend that they do just to start the process? Because it's terrifying, I'm sure.
If they have a friend or a family member that they totally trust, at that time, not that I didn't have family that I could have trusted, I was so embarrassed and so ashamed
Right.
of what I was discovering and what I was finding out and what I was feeling. And so I called someone that I felt was more neutral, and he was kind of a neutral friend. And I had heard a while back, and it must have stuck with me, that he had some situation where he was in an abusive situation himself, and he was being abused. He was being abused.
Yeah.
Right. So he was the one to really trigger me to get help. And so at that point, he was the one who convinced me to leave. He was the one who convinced me to contact my family, that they would be supportive. But it was really picking up that phone. I didn't do any Googling. I wasn't really Googling. I was aware of the shelters. It was really getting somebody on the phone and knocking some sense into me. And he was really kind about it. He was also very firm.
Sounds
so
like
it's really,
you were guided to the perfect person.
Yeah, I think the seeds were planted knowing that he had been through a situation where there was a form of abuse, and that he had to go to meetings, he had to seek support too. So he had already set like a model for me.
Right.
This is how I went about it. I'm healing.
Mm-hmm.
And I hadn't even started mine yet on my journey. So, but yeah, I think it's picking up the phone or going online. There are a lot of hotlines that you could go and find if you type in domestic abuse hotline, domestic violence hotline. You'll find a number of different resources in your area. There are many resources.
Great advice. Well, I just want to thank you so much. It's been so much fun. I mean, I know this is a really difficult topic, but you have been such a bright light to share your story with all of us. So I want to thank you so much for being so transparent.
Thank you for letting me share it.
Yeah, and for, giving people hope, because I think when you go through something and you're able to navigate your way out, you kind of set a template and show people that it's possible.
Yeah, and I think too with me is that I constantly would have this pattern, and we all change our patterns as we go on, and my pattern's getting a little bit better, but I would have a serious fear and I'd be paralyzed. I couldn't move. I would sit on my bed, or I would sit still sometimes for a couple hours. I was frozen in fear. And then I would move from fear into like sadness, but then I would get determined, and then I would take some kind of action to move me out of it. And so I started having this periods of shorter fear and paralyzation where I was paralyzed. I couldn't hardly move. I was just frozen. And then learning that, hey, here's the feeling. I need to let it come over me. I'm still getting better at this. And then I need to let it alleviate, and that feel the fear, but I need to take action anyways.
Yes. Yes.
And that I have to keep moving forward.
That's a huge part, because most people get stuck there. They get stuck in the fear part, right? And they get stuck in the emotion or the overwhelm of that. So
yeah, it can be overwhelming. I know what it feels like. Yeah. But so you can get past it.
Feeling it. And then, I always say maybe you do a check-in and just see where you stand, 1 to 10. 10's death and 1 is like, you're great.
That's a good idea.
Check in. Because a lot of times we kind of are reacting in maybe a 10 scenario, but okay, if you actually really check in, where am I? Where am I? How am I? Maybe you're a 5.
Right.
Maybe you're a 3. I don't know. You might be at, if 10's death, you might be at 8 and feel like I'm there, and then,
Yeah.
but you can at least have a gauge and like respond accordingly, right? If you
Right.
kind of check in, and then I think it's so important if you are in that mindset to create an action that's going to be empowering.
I think the nunchuck started helped me so much with those fears, because the fear, often, as it oftentimes does, ties in with anger. They'll toggle with each other.
Mm-hmm.
The fear causes anger, and so the anger also caused me to take an action. And then it became this more healing motion, cyclic effect.
Yeah. Do you do it every day? Is that something you obviously?
I don't always do it every day. I did it every day for a long time. Now I would say most days, but not every day. There's been a couple times where I might take a few days off. But the last several days I've been working them.
Awesome.
But I have my light up ones too. So those are the fun ones.
I know. That is so cool. That is so cool. Well, Christine, it has been such an honor sharing this time with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for letting me talk.
I love your story. I know you're going to touch a lot of lives. I hope you continue to address groups and talk about empowerment. I feel like the divine feminine is rising, that women's voices are going to be heard more and more. Yes. And there's going to be a more equitable distribution of power between men and women. I feel the winds of change blowing. I don't know how it's exactly going to unfold, but I know that it is going to be one woman at a time standing up and stepping into her power.
Yes.
So shine your light, girl.
Thank you.
Light up nunchucks.
Light up nunchucks. The dark and the light together.
Work it. Keep posting videos. I'm going to follow you on Instagram. I'm going to put
sweet.
I am. I'm going to put all of Christine's info at the end of the video. So check her out. Follow her on Instagram. She's got some cool stuff on there. And to my audience, thank you so much for hanging with us this hour. Take care of yourselves. And I love y'all. We'll see y'all later. Bye.
Thanks, Wendy.
Thanks, Christine.